Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I am the founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also a lecturer at the University of South Carolina, where I teach classes in marketing to MBA students and to seniors. Today on the show, I am so delighted to have Bill Salokar here with me. Um, I usually talk about AI, everyone knows that, but Bill and I have known each other for quite some time, and quite frankly, this is going to be a very personal story today. So, sit tight. You're going to hear some, amazing perspective from Bill. And quite frankly, as you hear it, it'll become apparent to you why I wanted Bill on. So, Bill, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Yogesh. Yeah, it's great to be here today. Yes.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Bill, before we get into the actual show itself, why don't you just do a bit of a brief background on who you are, so people know who you
Okay.
are.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a market researcher. Been in the world of marketing research since 1989 or so. So a long time. And
Okay.
most of that time has been on the supplier side. But I've had I got my start at the Florida Lottery and then Georgia Lottery, and that's where I kind of got my marketing research introduction. But
Uh-huh.
I live in Atlanta, Georgia. The Georgia Lottery brought me here from Florida, and the last 10 years almost, I have been at Skim. And my role has shifted over those years from being very much a uh, practicing statistician a long time ago to being a researcher hands on. And over time, became more of an account manager. And probably the last 15 or so years, been much more focused on business development. And a long time ago, I was much more introverted. I didn't think I could ever do what you would call sales, but I found that I actually like it. And as I have grown in my career, I felt much more comfortable talking to people and found that I enjoyed that side of the business more than the number side of the business.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. It's amazing how you realize that you have more than one skill set, and it's just a
Yeah.
matter of giving yourself a chance to try it out, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. So, Bill, today is one of those sessions where it's going to be a very deeply personal story of yours. And I don't want to preempt by saying anything. I want you to kind of like help unpack and unveil the storyline. So the only thing I will say is that you are helping destigmatize a very specific topic that affects many men, right?
Yes.
So why don't you tell us, how everything started first? How did this whole
Okay.
thing start for you?
Okay, yeah. So I'll just say I've been very transparent about my journey, and part of that comes from a couple of things in my background. One, my both my father and mother died from cancer. My father died from metastasized prostate cancer. My mother died from colon cancer. Both cancers are very treatable, especially today if they're detected early.
Mhm.
But they did not have that early warning, and so both of them succumbed to cancer in their early 70s. Which, as I get older, that seems a lot younger than it did when that actually happened.
Yeah.
So I've always been kind of aware of the impact of cancer. I also spent I mentioned about my career. I spent about a year and a half to 2 years working at the American Cancer Society in their market research group. And when I was there, the whole idea of early detection and awareness and communicating about cancer and supporting um, cancer patients, cancer caregivers was a critical part of the American Cancer Society mission. So while I left there as an employee, there's part of me that stayed on mission and
Mhm.
felt like there's a lot that we can all do to help support people that are dealing with cancer. And as you mentioned, prostate cancer in particular is something that affects many men. I think it's 1 in 8 will have prostate cancer treatment at some point in their lives. I remember when my dad was diagnosed, my wife at that point in time was working for a physician who was an internist, and her comment to me about it was, most men will have prostate cancer, the vast majority. Many of them will die with it rather than from it. And
Mhm.
so it is something that is broad, it affects men very broadly.
Mhm.
But men being men, we are very private about certain aspects of our health. And especially when you get into what a coworker of mine referred to years ago as any kind of ailment in the strike zone, you know, in that part of your body that is something we don't typically talk about. And,
Yeah.
and so prostate cancer being one of those kinds of conditions is one that a lot of folks are reluctant to talk about.
Yeah, and uh, I was looking at some statistics. Roughly 35,000 men in the U.S. Succumb to prostate cancer even today, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. And of
That's a big
course, yeah,
number.
just there's been heightened awareness, I think, because of President Biden's diagnosis,
Mhm.
and people are somewhat surprised that it had gone to the stage that it had, given the kind of medical attention the president would have received. But I think that again, when you hear about somebody famous either succumbing to prostate cancer or being diagnosed with it, it really does heighten that awareness.
Yeah, it does. And quite frankly, I was so excited that you were wanting to come on to this podcast to talk about this because, as you know, I one of my passion areas is around brands that operate in stigmatized industries,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And in this particular case, we're not talking, we're talking about you as the brand, if you want to call it that, right?
Yes.
But the fact that you are addressing stigma head on, and by coming and talking about something that people don't want to talk about, um, uh, I was so excited about that from that vantage point. But more importantly, just for you to share your story. So why
Yeah.
don't we start at the beginning part of it? How did you find out that you
Okay.
had prostate cancer?
Yeah. So I have been unlike some men, I've been very good about regularly seeing my general practitioner, and so I have been seeing my doctor about every 6 months. I have my cholesterol checked and just do a general physical once a year as part of the regimen of tests that my physician's office did. As I got to a certain age, and I forget exactly what age it was, maybe 50 or so, they began doing a PSA
Mhm.
test as part of the um, testing. And it's just another test that they use the blood that they draw for other tests, and they include that. And so for a long time, I was in the normal range. And so I got reports on my cholesterol levels and all those kind of things and my PSA level, and it was fine. But then about 8 years or so ago, it started to tick up. And the thing about PSA scores for a lot of men is it changes very slowly.
Mm.
There are cases where somebody might see a drastic change in their PSA score. But for a lot of us, it is something that's much more gradual. But
Mhm.
once it got to a level of 4, uh, it was something that my physician said, this is something we should probably think about. On top of that, they knew about my dad's prostate cancer. And so having a father or male relative with prostate cancer increases your risk. I guess there's some genetic or hereditary connection there. And so that put me at a higher risk. And so my physician recommended that I see a urologist. And that just the name of the doctor, urology, is something that's kind of off-putting.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
yeah, but it's like, okay, well, I saw what happened with my dad. I wanted to be good about following through. So I made an appointment and saw that my urologist. They likewise did a PSA test and confirmed that yeah, it was above normal. And so within a few months, they recommended doing a biopsy,
Mm.
and that's a typical kind of first step to understand what's going on in the prostate, and this would help them kind of see to what extent there are cancer cells there, and also what type of cancer cells there are. And so
Mhm.
when we think about cancer, sometimes we think about it as just it's a single thing, but there's actually lots of variations. Even within an organ, there can be a lot of variation in terms of the type and aggressiveness of the cancer cells. So what you're hoping for is that you're going to have non-aggressive, very slow growing cancer,
Mhm.
and that's what my hope was. And so I went through the first biopsy, and It's not a pleasant kind of thing because the first biopsy that I did was one where I had local anesthesia, but I was wide awake during the procedure. And so the doctor and a nurse are taking samples from the prostate using a needle-like kind of instrument. And so I won't go into any more detail than that, but it's not a comfortable thing, although you don't feel any pain. It's just, uh, I'll just say uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then it takes a while for the healing because they took about 25 samples. I think that's typical.
Wow.
Once they take the samples, they can then send them to the lab and come back with some additional diagnostics. And so the good news was those initial uh, diagnostics said I had a slow growing form of cancer. And so that means we're just going to keep an eye on it. So at that point in time, I did a follow up with my urologist, and he said, where you are right now, you've got a couple of choices. You can decide to treat right now, and the most aggressive form of treatment is we can just remove your prostate, or we can do active surveillance. So I said, and I'm not a big one for surgery. I've never had surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, let's talk about this active surveillance option. He said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so what that means is we're just going to keep an eye on it, and you're going to come in for PSA draws every 6 months, and we're going to just track this.
Mm-hmm.
And if the cancer does not become more aggressive, if the score does not go up very quickly, we'll just keep watching it and see what happens. And so my hope at that point in time was maybe it's just never going to be a big issue. And
Mm-hmm.
it'll just stay at a level where we'll keep an eye on it, but we don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely didn't want to do the surgery option. It was just scary at that point. But I was also thinking about my dad's experience, and I didn't want to just forget about it and let it go. And so I began that active surveillance process. That was something that over the next 6, 7 years meant about every 2 years I had another biopsy done. So the second biopsy was very similar to the first one, and again, it came back where nothing much had changed, but the PSA number kept ticking up a little bit. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the next process was having an MRI done. And so the MRI is done to help they get a different view of the prostate and how aggressive or where the cancer is. And then they did what they call an MRI guided biopsy. So this is another procedure where, in this case, I am out with like a propofol type of anesthesia. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like having a colonoscopy. So you're out with a light sedative, and they use the MRI um, results and basically overlay that against the image of your prostate. And so they are able to take a biopsy that is much more targeted. So they can see
Mm-hmm.
where there are spots of cancer, and they're going to take samples right from those areas. Because in the other type, they're really just taking random samples. And
Right.
we have a lot of researchers here. We know what random samples are, but if you can do a targeted sample, that means you're going to get more information. And so I ended up doing two of those. One of those was during the height of COVID, so it had all the extra issues about extra care with, as we all remember from the COVID days. But
Mm-hmm.
during all that time, we were keeping an eye on it, but the numbers still kept going up, very very slightly, but in a single direction of going up. And so I went to my urologist in, I think it was November, December of 2023. They did a PSA reading, and it had gotten up to, it was about 15 or 16. So this getting to be a fairly high number.
Mm-hmm.
And so my urologist said, so we've been watching this for a number of years now. I think it's time to do something. So yeah, it was,
So, so one question I have for you, actually, I have several questions. So, you chose the, let's track it, the active, tracking piece of it, and you're seeing, you're going through these uncomfortable tests, as you
yeah,
described, every 6 months, right? It's
yeah.
not pleasant, it's not easy, and all that kind of stuff. Emotionally, you must have been going through a roller coaster, I would imagine, as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, from an emotional perspective,
Hmm.
it would be, yeah, being concerned, fearful about what the results are going to say.
Hmm.
The results would come back and say, okay, we're going to just keep watching it. Okay, back down. And it's like, okay, just kind of forget about it for a while. I know I've got an appointment six
Yeah.
months or whatever later. I'm
Hmm.
not going to think about it much in the meantime. And so, and so there was that, that's a good way to describe it, a roller coaster of anxiety, concern, worry, uh,
Hmm.
as we're going into the test, and then results saying, yeah, we don't need to do anything yet. Okay. And there's part of me that is very good at putting things off. And
Yeah.
so uh, it would be nice in a way just to say, okay, don't have to think about it. Let's just put this off. But I also didn't want to, stop doing the surveillance, because I realized that was critical to my long-term health and survival.
Right. So now you've hit the point where your urologist is saying we got to change our decision making from active surveillance to we need to do
Right.
something more, right?
Yeah.
What was that conversation like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And so my urologist and I, we'd gotten to know each other pretty well. So very frank discussion. I felt very comfortable talking with him. And
Hmm.
he said, given what age you are, there are two options. And he said, if you were a lot younger, and so when I had my treatment, I was 67.
Hmm.
So he said, if you were younger, like closer to 60 or younger than 60, we would probably recommend you have surgery and remove the prostate,
Hmm.
uh, because that just alleviates any potential concern for the future.
Hmm.
And the younger you are, the better equipped you are to handle any kind of, the healing from it, any potential side effects. The older you are, the more risk you have.
Hmm.
He said, if you were over 70, I would say definitely do radiation,
Hmm.
but you're right in between there.
Hmm.
So it's really up to you. So I said, so what do you recommend I do? He said, I'm going to leave that decision to you. He said, we have surgeons here at the practice, the urology practice. I can
Hmm.
set up an appointment with a surgeon, or I can refer you to a radiology oncologist.
Hmm.
And again, my preference was to avoid surgery,
Hmm.
and that's a personal preference. And so I said, let me check out the radiation option.
Hmm.
I also, and I can talk more about this, about having kind of a group of folks that were supporting me. One of the best things that one of my friends who had gone through prostate cancer several years before,
Hmm.
he recommended getting this book, and it's uh, it's a great resource for prostate cancer breakthroughs and options.
Hmm.
There are a lot of options out there now. It used to be that it was much more limited, but there
Hmm.
are a lot of them. But they're all the best option for you depends on partly your personal preference, what you want to do, but also what kind of cancer you have and what stage it's in, that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, so I decided I would go first to the to radiation, to a radiation oncologist, and I went and I had an appointment that started with a physician's assistant, and she became my North Star. She was wonderful. She spent so much time walking through where I was, what radiation therapy would look like, uh, how that compared to surgery as another option. She
Hmm.
had a whole bunch of statistics that she shared, and I'm a statistician by training, so I loved all that.
Yeah.
But it was very caring, and it was very detailed. And I could just tell that she knew what she was talking about.
Hmm.
And and I felt very comfortable with that. And then the doctor himself came in, and I spent maybe 10 minutes with the doctor. I'd probably spent about 30 or 40 minutes with the PA.
Hmm.
And, but again, his demeanor, his bedside manner, and his assurance convinced me that this was the way to go.
Okay.
And so I know a lot of folks spend more time talking to multiple doctors, looking at options. But I knew if I went to the surgeon, they would just say, yeah, we recommend surgery. That's what they do. And I had heard from other men who had been down this road that if you talk to a surgeon, they're basically going to say, yeah, we recommend surgery.
Mhm.
Uh, for the radiologist, it was more, here are the options. So I like that approach. But again, I just felt so good after that initial meeting that I thought, this is where I want to have my treatment.
What surprises me in this part of your description is that it wasn't just the statistics and the facts that reassured you. It was the emotional connection that you got from the PA and the doctor that
Yes,
convinced you this was the right choice.
yes,
Am I fair in saying that?
yeah, yeah, you're right. And in our world of marketing research, we often talk about these different components, the rational and the emotional, and how they work
Hmm.
together. And I could
Yeah.
see that in myself, that it was that it felt like it connected on both of those levels. One, just like personally, we clicked. I had personal confidence. I just felt like this is somebody I can talk to, and and then all of the everything she said made sense from a more just practical, functional level.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So I just felt like, okay, why should I look somewhere else if I feel this good about it?
Right. Um, in your mind, as you were approaching this particular appointment, I'm sure you had doubts as well, right? Going in, like you had a sense of what you wanted to do, and you obviously were clear that I don't want to do surgery, but I still don't know enough about this radiation option.
Yeah.
Have you given any thought to if they would have said something that would have made you say, "Oh my God, I don't want to do this"? Um, was there any fear or anxiety around that part of the
Yeah.
thinking process?
Yeah. Again, I think this is part of why prostate cancer can be very stigmatizing.
Hmm.
There are certain potential side effects, no matter what treatment you go with.
Yeah.
And these are things that are very personal. And they're around erectile dysfunction, they're
Mhm.
around incontinence. And
Right.
so I think for anybody, well, not anybody, for men in particular, erectile dysfunction is something that, yeah, there are treatments for that, but it's again a very personal kind of thing, and I want to avoid it if I can. And the incontinence is something that it's like for anybody, you don't want to have to live with that if that becomes an issue. And so there was a lot of concern about which of these treatment options would minimize those risks, the risks for those kind of adverse side effects. And
And all three are sixing at the end of the day. So it's like one building on top of the other, which can be really overwhelming and daunting for any
yeah,
person at the end of the day, right?
right. And again, that's why this book goes into a lot of detail about what those the statistics are for various side effects. So
Mhm.
sometimes a treatment might seem like this is less invasive, this is easier, but there's a higher risk of side effects. Um, and so that was it was something we talked about a lot. And again, I felt very comfortable talking about this. And uh, you have to kind of be open about it, and you have to be willing to ask the questions, so you're not just thinking about this and walking away wondering about it. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah,
You mentioned that you were talking to other men who had gone through this similar experience. So you were
yeah,
obviously reaching out. So that was one part of it. But you're reading the book, of course, which is another piece of it. Um, was there any other kind of preparation you did, uh, prior to going into that meeting uh, with the oncologist, so that you were prepared to ask better questions or the right questions or enough questions that reassured you, like
yeah,
there's a range there, right?
yeah, yeah,
So.
yeah. And so again, I will say having a strong support network is really key. And I actually talked about this in with the MRX Pros group about how important it was to have a support group. But in
Mhm.
particular, it was really good to have people that I could ask very specific questions to. And for
Mhm.
me, there were three men in particular that were extremely helpful. One of them is a friend of mine. We used to run together. We still see each other all the time. He had been through prostate cancer several years ago. He's the one that recommended the book. Uh,
Mhm.
the type of treatment he did and his decision was not something I could do. And he actually decided to have his treatment done. So I'm in Atlanta. He went to Johns Hopkins up in
Mhm.
Baltimore for his
Okay.
treatment. And I was
Right.
like, I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
Uh, the second person is a close personal friend, and he had a more aggressive form of prostate cancer. And unlike me, who had, I had several years to kind of prepare myself for it, his
Mhm.
came on much more suddenly. And he ended up doing his doctor recommended doing surgery, removing the prostate. And this, I think, shaped some of my thought on this was he he has his prostate removed. If you have your prostate removed and everything is successful, your PSA should go to nearly zero. But
Mhm.
his began ticking up
Oh.
several months after he had the surgery. That meant that they had not caught it before it had gone into the surrounding tissue. So he ended up having to do radiation on top of
Mhm.
the surgery. So
Wow.
he had the surgery and he had more radiation than I had because his was more aggressive. And I
Right.
thought, well, I don't want to go down that path. So
Yeah.
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 And then the third friend of mine is somebody who's very private. He lives just a few doors down from me here in my neighborhood, but his wife is a nurse. And
Mhm.
so she experienced prostate cancer through her husband, and she was like a wealth of information and being a nurse and also just very open to talking about it. And
Mhm.
she was also one of those folks that provided lots of encouragement and information. And importantly, these are the questions you should be asking. So
Mhm.
she was feeding me some good information that I could turn into questions for uh, my urologist and radiologist. So all of those together really helped. Absent those, I probably would have been, much less supported and equipped going into all of that.
I have a question before that, though.
Yeah.
As you were talking, this kind of like occurred to me, which is that how do you even broach the subject with anybody? Hey, what do you know about prostate cancer? Do you have any experience, or like, w- how did that conversation even start? Because I can see guys, not wanting
Yeah.
to even come close to that kind of conversation,
Yeah.
if you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah. Well, I'll just go through them. So the close friend of mine, the one that had the surgery and the
Yeah,
radiation,
yeah,
we've been close friends for a long time. We're like couples friends. We
yeah,
hung out and so we're just very open about what's going on in our lives. So that's how
yeah.
that came up. It was that one was pretty easy. My friend that I ran with, I knew about his because he had to do treatment during the time that we were running together regularly. And so I knew he had gone through it. And so when my diagnosis came back and said it's treatment time, I just brought it up with him and said,
Mhm,
so I'm at a point where you're saying I need to do treatment. Tell me what you did.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so he and I had just a very frank kind of one-on-one conversation. And then the um, the neighbor friend, whose wife is a nurse, he never mentioned it, and he probably never would have, but his wife
Right,
did. Yeah. And
right.
so she has been someone that over the years that we've been here as neighbors, we've talked about a lot of health issues.
Hmm.
And so it was easy to begin talking to her. So the initial conversation was with her,
Hmm.
and then I would see her husband, and he would open up more about it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But
But
it's also just one of those things like you kind of develop a bond of like
yeah,
you're going through these things together, or you've been through it, you know what it's like, so like you can share it more.
of course. No, I completely get that. But I think there's a
But
there's an insight
I
here.
can't. I lost your audio.
Oops, can you hear me now? No? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
No.
Ooh,
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yep, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know
Um,
what happened, but
okay, why don't you do this? I'm going to leave and come back. Just stay where you
okay.
are. Okay. Let me leave the studio. Leave studio. Oh, you know what? That's not going to work. Hold on. 1 second. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. You're back.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. All right, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sorry about that. It's just a technical glitch, I guess.
Yeah.
So coming back to the conversation, um, I think there's an insight here for everyone, which is that it's an uncomfortable conversation to have with people, but it's important to reach out and be a bit vulnerable
Yes.
about this, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when people may start actually opening up and saying, yeah, I actually am going through the same kind of thing too, and or have gone through the same kind of thing too, and here's what I learned, kind of thing, right? So that vulnerability is something that's really important in this kind of conversation, I would imagine.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons that some men are not open to ever mentioning it because they don't want to ever appear vulnerable. They don't want to appear
Hmm.
weak or that they have some kind of need. And yeah, so that can definitely be a barrier. But I did find that there were places that were safer
Hmm.
to bring it up. And so one was with those three individuals. The other, I'm very involved in my local church,
Hmm.
and that was another safe place
Hmm.
to share with. During the time I was going through all this, I served on our church elder board, and
Hmm.
so there's a group of men in our church. It's only men on the elders board. So again, it was a very safe space to bring
Yeah.
it up and say, this is going on. I want your prayers and support. So
Hmm.
that was just another venue to be vulnerable. And in that kind of setting, people are perhaps more open and vulnerable, just
Hmm.
given the nature of that kind of community. So it's a challenge if you don't know people
Hmm.
or you're not in a place like a church or something similar, like it's some kind of organization or group. It can be, you can be very isolated and not know who to reach out to, and so your support might be limited to just your healthcare team,
Yeah.
and they're great. I mean, my experience was great, but not everybody has the same experience there.
Of course, of course, I
Yeah.
totally understand that. Okay, so the story has come to the point where you have to make a choice. You made the choice that you want to go down the radiation treatment path. What
Yes.
was that experience like?
Yeah. So there were a couple of things that I needed to think about and kind of square away. So the first one was when I learned what the treatment was going to look like, it was going to take about 6 weeks of treatment. And the way they did my radiation, and I think this is very typical, is you go in for an appointment every weekday, same time. So mine was 2 o'clock every weekday. I would
Mhm.
go to the radiology center and have my treatment. So that meant I needed to be able to take time off from work. So one thing I had to do was say, okay, um, I work for Skim. Uh, is this how do I do this? Fortunately for us, we created a policy change a couple of years ago that provided unlimited sick leave,
Mhm.
which is one of those things that is a real blessing to have,
Mhm.
as long as people aren't abusing it. And so there are some limitations about that. But I talked to two people initially, my HR director and my direct manager, and
Mhm.
said this was going on, and this would mean that I need to take time off during this time period. The first kind of question
Mhm.
they asked was, "Does this mean you're going to be just off for this whole period?" And I said, "No, I think I'll be able to work," because they said, especially early on, you hardly even know any impact from the radiation. As it progresses, you'll get some potential issues, fatigue, and so forth, that might limit you.
Mhm.
But my thought was, I'm going to try to work as much as I can because when I enjoy my work. Secondly, it was a nice thing to be distracted. And the third thing was, I just really didn't need it. I didn't need to be off all day, every day for that period of time.
Yeah.
So what I did for the most part was I would work until about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, have lunch, get ready, go to my appointment. Most days I would be back by about 3 o'clock, and then I could just finish out the workday. And I was able to take that amount of time. My HR director said, if you need more time, if you're feeling like you can't work, we can put you on short-term disability.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I did not need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
My manager was incredibly supportive of this and said, you just do whatever you need to do
Mm-hmm.
and work where you can. I was not able to travel during that time period, so it was a kind of a nice break from travel.
Yeah.
But I was able to work, and so that kind of squared things away. It didn't have any financial impact on my salary, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually able to be pretty productive most of the time. So
Yeah.
again, I blocked out my calendar, so I had like a 2 or 3 hour block on my calendar every afternoon for that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my colleagues, I said, don't let my schedule stand in the way of anything progressing. And they
Mm-hmm.
did. So I missed some meetings, but it was fine. Everything went along just fine.
Yeah.
As time went on, so after about 3 weeks of radiation, you begin to feel some fatigue. And so in addition to going out to have the radiation treatment, I would come home and take a nap for 30 minutes. And then
Mm-hmm.
I feel great. So it took a little bit more time as we got into the latter half of the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one thing, getting that squared away. The other thing was for me in the workplace, I have seen over the years, a lot of times people are out on medical leave, and that's all you hear. Medical leave for some designated period or undesignated period of time, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're back, and nobody ever says anything about what's going on.
Yeah.
And my thought on that was, I don't want people to wonder.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. I'm just going to tell people. And so I started off with a group of people, that I was closest to, some of my closer colleagues, told them what was going on. But then I began to tell other people, and it's like, I'm not hiding this. This is what's going on. I'm having radiation treatment, and it's for prostate cancer, and I'll be out for a while. And people were very accepting of that, and I
Right.
think they even appreciated the fact that I was open about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that actually,
Yeah,
because um, I think people feel like, first of all, it's private stuff, right? So that's one part of it. Um, and especially in the workplace, where is that line of sharing personal information? It's a moving line at the end of the
yeah,
day, right? And everyone struggles with that on lots of different topics.
yeah,
um, so you made a choice that, okay, I'm going to share this. How do you said people were accepting of it, but what was the reaction really? The first reaction, like, oh, was it surprise? Was it so there's that initial reaction, but then the second part to my question is, how did they treat you? Did they treat you the same, or did they start treating you differently because of what you told them?
yeah. So I think anytime you mention cancer, it can be
Yeah.
uh, people are very concerned, and
Mhm.
they should be, because cancer is a serious thing.
Yeah.
And so I think for some people it was like, oh, you have cancer, and my response was yes. And I've actually known about this for a number of years. We've just been watching it, and it finally got to a point, just like I talked about my story. I just said it got to a point where we decided we needed to treat it, and I would use this line: I'm not getting younger, I'm not getting healthier. I may as well do it now.
Right.
And so I also, I used humor where I could,
Mhm.
because I think, again, humor, it makes me feel more comfortable sometimes in an awkward situation, but it makes others feel comfortable too.
Yeah.
Uh, but I didn't want to overshare, so I didn't ever tell anybody anything more than what they asked about. I just,
Mhm.
it's radiation treatment, and most people never asked any more about exactly what happens.
Right.
Yeah,
And from a treat, and did they treat you differently, or did they continue to treat you just like, you're there, so you're at work, kind of thing?
yeah. I think people gave me more deference than usual.
Okay.
Yeah, so more willing to kind of work around me, and my coworkers treat me pretty well. There's some where we're, have kind of a, joking around, kind of giving
Mhm.
each other hard times about different things.
Yeah.
But there was maybe a little bit less of that. Um, yeah.
Mhm. So, in preparation for this podcast, you were sharing with me something that happened in your church group
Yes.
after one of these sessions, if I'm not mistaken. You want to share what
Sure.
happened?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, again, I like the idea of using humor to kind of soften the um, the conversation, and again, to make things kind of maybe more out in the open.
Yeah.
And so so the story I was telling you, I attend a Wednesday night Bible study at my church. There's about 30 or 40 people that come,
Yeah.
and I had gone the Wednesday before my treatment started, and I asked people to pray for me. Said
Mhm.
this was starting, didn't know how it was going to be, but asked for their prayers, and it was very solemn. And people gathered around me and put their hands on my shoulder, and we had some prayers, and it was a very moving experience.
Mhm.
And so my treatment started the next Monday, and I decided I was still feeling pretty good, so I went in that Wednesday, and I actually have to pull this out because I shared this with you. I have this little flashlight that's it's actually very bright, and
Mhm.
I decided just I would stick it in my pants, right, kind of where the prostate is, and I walked into the group with it on at the highest setting, and so you could see this light shining through my pants, and and I said, yeah, they started the radiation, yeah.
That must have definitely, broken the ice for sure.
And I'm sure there's some people that thought that was probably inappropriate, but it's okay. But I had fun, as much fun as I could, given
Of
that. But
course.
again, part of it was just to say, yeah, this is going on, and
Mhm.
I'm doing okay. And again, that vulnerability, that openness meant that people were very willing to talk to me about, thinking about me, praying
Mhm.
for me. All those kind of things. It just really opened the door for that, I think, to a larger degree.
Of course, of course.
Yeah,
And the other thing I think also is that even as you're going through this experience, and maybe there were uh, points in time where you were feeling or experiencing something that wasn't talked about yet with your doctor or with your PA,
yeah,
right? How did you deal with that? Maybe your support network may also have not felt it, or there must have been, I would imagine, gaps in terms of your own information at that point, right?
yeah, yeah. And there was someone else I relied on. I have a younger sister who had breast cancer several years ago, and
Okay.
they caught it very early, so she was treated, and
Hmm.
she's fine today. I think it's 20 years ago, but she went through radiation treatment.
Yeah.
And so she was somebody that I would regularly, I probably talked to her a couple times a week, either
Hmm.
on my way to the radiologist or the way back,
Yeah.
and say, this is what's going on.
Hmm.
Is this something you felt? And we'd compare notes and that kind of thing. And so that was a different level of support. And being a sister, again, we're very close.
Of course.
So we could share that. And yeah, so that helped. But yeah, sometimes there would be just things that might be surprising. And as the radiation treatment progresses into the fourth, fifth week,
Hmm.
uh, your body is getting radiated. And so while the radiation is targeted at the prostate where the cancer cells are, the radiation also affects the area around, your lower extremities. And
Yeah.
so you can have some side effects. And so, yeah, there were some that were kind of unexpected. So, yeah, I would do two things. One, I look things up online, but there was so much online, it was hard to navigate sometimes. But I
Hmm.
also had a really good nurse at uh, the radiology office, and I would talk to her about it. And so
Hmm.
we would do a weekly nurse check-in where it was more extensive, but she was always there. And so there was one period of time where I was having some issues, and she and I just would talk every day, and she would make suggestions, and I would try them, and we finally kind of figured out
Hmm.
um, uh, kind of how to take care of it. But
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And one of the things that I'm hearing, I've heard two examples of this, and you know, where people have actually used ChatGPT to give them support, emotional support, health support, whatever you want to call it, because yes, they were getting information from the experts and everything else, and their support network as well. But as one person described it to me, she said that um, people were still tiptoeing around her because of her cancer,
Hmm.
and she found that ChatGPT was the one that would give her the honest feedback
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
yeah.
right? So, um, that was her truth. I think in your case, you went through this before ChatGPT was a thing, right? Or was it around
Well,
that time?
it was out and available, but
Yeah,
my mindset about ChatGPT,
yeah,
and this is just like a year and a half ago or
yeah.
so, was it was more very specific for I have I'm gonna ask it some particular question, um,
Hmm.
but it was more of a curiosity, I would say almost. I wasn't
Yeah,
really thinking about using it as a regular tool.
yeah.
Now today, one of the things I have found more recently is that if I do a search, like instead of doing something where I would use a typical web search, I use ChatGPT or something like that
Hmm.
and do a search. I get much more targeted feedback, and I get it uncluttered. And so
Hmm.
I think in today's world of web searching, there's so much in the way of sponsored content
Hmm.
and all of that that it's you have to do a lot of digging through it all to figure out what it is that you're really looking for. So I think I could have used it more if I had known more about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it was so new. Even a year and a
yeah,
half ago, like ChatGPT's only been around since like November of 20 what two. So
yeah,
it's not
right,
that new. I mean, it's not that old, right? So
right, yeah,
but the point you're making about the fact that when you're doing web searches, there's so much sponsored content. Is that the right content for you? You have
yeah,
no way of deciphering that, I would imagine.
right, yeah. And again, yeah, you have, I would do searches and it would come back from reputable places like the Cleveland Clinic or Mayo Clinic or
Yeah.
places like that that I knew something about. But then there's also all this other content, and you
Hmm.
just don't know where it's coming from. I mean, it may
Right.
be named there, but it doesn't mean anything. And so, can I trust this, or is it really steering me towards a particular outcome that had, whoever's sponsoring this has a vested interest? So
Of
I had
course.
a lot less faith in that. But what I did have was, in addition to the book, I pulled these out. I also had this big notebook of information about going through radiation, and
Hmm.
you use the term finding your truth, so finding your true north.
Yeah.
So these are things the hospital or the hospital center, the radiology center
Hmm.
provided. So there was lots of good content there too, but
Right.
also there was just their willingness to be available. And I'll tell you what, one of the scary moments for me was, um, so I'd been diagnosed, went to the radiologist, the, decided I was going to follow the radiation treatment protocol. So the first step in that process, and I kind of mentioned this when we talked the other day, is they go in and do a CT scan,
Hmm.
and they do the CT scan basically to see where what your anatomy looks like, so that when they're setting up the treatment plan, they know exactly where the prostate organ is and all the surrounding tissue, because
Hmm.
they want to maximize radiation where they want to maximize, where they're targeting, and
Yeah.
minimize it elsewhere. And so that CT scan is an important part. And as it turned out, it was on my birthday, January 25th, and again, I had a little fun with that because as part of that process, they go in and they do this alignment. And to make sure that the alignment is consistent through the treatment, they want to have some markers. And so not every radiologist does this, but mine actually uses a tattoo pen, a tattoo needle, and puts like a little freckle mark on the left and right hip and right in between. And those are the points that they're aligning to. And so I had fun saying that for my birthday last year, I got 3 tattoos, and then a young woman took pictures of me half naked because they document it. So again, I had a little bit of fun with that, but yeah. So anyway, that was the fun part, and it was interesting process. But then they called me the next morning and they said, "We'd like you to go to the hospital that they're associated with and have a PSMRI, I think is what it's called." So I'm thinking, okay, they went in and they did this CT scan, and now they're asking me to go get an MRI done. What did they see? What did they find? It was just something that we hadn't seen before. So my heart was racing,
Of course.
and it's like, okay, this does not look good, and I'm already thinking, okay, it's metastasized prostate cancer. What does the treatment look like for this, as opposed to what I thought it was going to be? So a moment of real fear. But I called my PA and I said, I don't understand why we're doing this. What's going on? She said, please, no need to worry. This is a normal step. This is what we do for staging the cancer. So, we talk about cancers as being stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. We're surprised that this had not happened already, but there's a specialized MRI. They inject a dye into your system, and they can actually see if prostate cancer cells appear anywhere else in your body. And which is really remarkable. And the hope is they're only in your prostate. But if they moved out, that means that they would change the treatment protocol to something more aggressive.
Yeah.
So this is just a normal thing, and we don't expect that we're going to get anything other than what we already know. I'm like, okay, so I went in and had this MRI on a Friday.
Yeah.
And it was a restless weekend.
Of course. Of course.
And my PA called me Monday morning and said, I just got the results. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was the kind of, again, the kind of care I felt. She knew I was concerned. And so as soon as she had the results, she called me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you went through that. You went through 6 weeks of radiation.
Yeah.
They must have done additional tests as well to confirm whether the cancer was completely removed.
Yeah. So So actually, what I did was I did 5 weeks of what they call proton beamed radiation. Also went through a 1-day procedure called brachytherapy, which is a more intense treatment. You've heard of like seed implants. And so this is a more up-to-date version of that. So what this procedure does, and it's an outpatient procedure at the same place, they insert these tiny little microscopic catheters right into the prostate. They put me out for all this to happen, by the way. And then they put these little high-dose radiation seeds down those catheters to the point where there are cancer cells close by. They zap it for like a second, and then they pull the seed back out.
Wow.
It's an amazing process, and it took like one morning, and so that together with the external beam was the whole treatment regimen.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So
So that was a little side step, but yeah. So then what they'll do, what they did is they said, so with radiation treatment, what they're doing, the way I understand it, is they are disrupting cancer cells' DNA and keeping them from being able to replicate.
right.
So they don't really kill the cancer cells, but they keep them from being able to replicate. And your body naturally over time will produce healthy cells, and they will take the place of the cancer cells if all goes well. The way they measure that is PSA again. So they said it takes a little while, and it doesn't happen immediately. They said about 18 months to 24 months post-treatment, you should bottom out with your PSA.
Okay.
It takes that long. So so I had and because they've done all this to kind of irritate your prostate, they don't do anything right away. But a couple months after the treatment, I had my first PSA reading, and it was down to 5 point something.
Wow.
And then I had
Wow.
a second one, and it was four something, and so I'm going back again in a couple more months for another one. So it is moving in the right direction.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah,
So, you hear, people say I'm cancer free. When do they make that kind of declaration? Is it um, when you hit zero again, or how does that work?
yeah. I think, and I don't know if they'll ever say that. That's a good question that I haven't actually asked.
Hmm.
But yeah, they said we're going to keep an eye on it for 18 to 24 months to
Hmm.
see how it goes.
Hmm.
I think after that it will. I'm not sure how that goes, but my last appointment with my radiologist was now a couple months ago.
Hmm.
What he said to me was, "Come in for a PSA test in 6 months. You don't need to see a doctor for a year."
Okay.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm retiring, and you'll see another doctor. Yeah,
Which is always a bit, like, no, don't go away, not yet.
yeah, yeah. And then with my radiologist, I saw them in December, and my next appointment's not till August.
Got it. Got it. So
So
they feel confident that you don't have to come,
right,
with the degree
yeah,
of regularity that you had previously. So that's a good sign, of course,
yeah,
right?
right.
So, how has your life changed now that you've gone through this experience? Has it changed in any way? Are you feeling differently? Talk to us about that.
Well, one, I feel very blessed that I was able to have this kind of treatment and that it has progressed so much in terms of diagnosing and treatment compared to what my dad,
Yeah.
30 years ago had gone through. And I wish this kind of treatment had been available to him
Mhm.
because he could have lived a lot longer.
Yeah.
So there's just that feeling of gratitude that this is something that's available. And I also feel very thankful that my treatment went well. And, there are folks that do have side effects or it's more challenging for them.
Hmm.
So I feel very fortunate about that. I also feel like it's given me an opportunity to help others. So I have a brother-in-law who's been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I've been able to coach him. Uh, there's actually someone at my church is just going through right now. He had prostate surgery actually just a couple days ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
so being able to be very open and supportive. So I kind of look at it as, to not to be too cliche, but paying it forward. So
Yeah.
I had lots of support. I want to be somebody that is supportive. And the fact that I'm open about it, people know about it, then if they're having an issue, they like talk to Bill. He's been through that.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, completely. I totally get that.
Yeah.
What is there any, I don't want to use the word advice because this is not really advice. This is encouragement at the end of the
Yeah.
day, right? What would you encourage men to do,
Yeah.
given that you've gone through this experience yourself?
Yeah. Do the basics. See a doctor regularly. Have whatever the doctor thinks you should be having in terms of tests. It's a lifesaver. You read about people dying from prostate cancer, and
Mhm.
in my mind, it's like, did you not get a PSA test done early enough? I mean,
Mhm.
maybe they did. It's not a foolproof thing,
Yeah.
but as I do the basics and be willing to be vulnerable if you need to be, and the payoff is incredible.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
So, Bill, we're almost at the top of the hour, and I can't believe how quickly time flew by in this conversation.
yeah.
Um, just to kind of like wrap up this particular show, are there resources that you would recommend people refer to? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I think find some reputable literature from well-known practitioners in the area. For me, it was prostate cancer. There are a number of good books out there. uh, find a doctor that you really like and can talk to. And that
Mhm.
made a world, I really, I love my general practitioner, their practice. My urologist, he and I became, I felt like as close as I can to a doctor.
Yeah.
And having that level of comfort gives you so much more um, confidence that you're being cared for, not just on a, uh, you know, uh, the actual medical practice, but the emotional support that goes hand in hand with it. I
Mhm.
think there are doctors and practices out there that aren't real good at that.
Mhm.
And if you have an opportunity to find one that is, to me, that makes all the difference. And I tell you what, when the radiation treatment was over, there was part of me that just felt sad that I wasn't going to get to see this group of folks that I was seeing
Mhm.
every day for several weeks. It's like, I'm going to miss you guys.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I'm not going to miss going through the treatment. So
Of course, of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing such a personal story.
Thank you.
You
Yeah,
know, I am convinced that people, will benefit from hearing your story, and hopefully they will take the right and appropriate actions for their own health at the end of the day. I heard about your situation at the MRX meeting when you announced it
yeah,
several months ago, and I was shocked when I heard it. To be honest with you, and I that was the last thing I expected to hear from you that day. The fact that you're here now and you're sharing this it means a lot to me as well. So thank you for being on the show, and thank you so much for sharing. And to everybody who's been listening in, please heed Bill's advice. Um, Find the resources. There are some amazing resources available online. Talk to your doctor, make sure you get yourself checked. It's a lifesaver. So,
yeah.
Bill, thank you again.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have Mike Stevens on. He's going to be talking about AI and the tech that he's seeing from an AI perspective in the market research space. So, stay tuned on that. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and see you in a couple of weeks.